Welcome to Rose and Retribution. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The champagne glass slipped from Emma's fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the penthouse bathroom. But she didn't hear it. She couldn't hear anything except the thunderous pounding of her own heart as she stared at the phone screen in her trembling hand. The text message glowed like a brand, burning itself into her retinas. Tonight's the night we get rid of her. Once Emma signs those transfer documents, the company's ours. Then you can finally leave her. I'm tired of being your secret, Daniel. Emma pressed her palm against the cold bathroom wall, fighting the wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm her. The message wasn't meant for her. It had come from her fiancé Daniel's phone, the phone he'd carelessly left on the bathroom counter while he showered. The phone that had lit up with this poisonous revelation just seconds after she'd stepped in to touch up her lipstick before their engagement party. Their engagement party. The party happening right now, just beyond this bathroom door, where 200 guests were celebrating a love that had never existed. 3 years of beautiful lies. Emma had met Daniel Thornton 3 years ago when she'd started as a secretary at Thornton Industries, the multi-billion-dollar tech empire his family had built over 3 generations. She'd been 24, fresh out of business school, drowning in student debt, and desperate to prove herself in the cutthroat corporate world of Manhattan. Daniel had been 29, devastatingly handsome, and, she'd thought, genuinely kind. He'd noticed her immediately, or so he'd claimed, asked her to work directly for him as his personal executive assistant. Their relationship had started professionally, but Daniel had pursued her with a charm that had felt irresistible. Late nights at the office had turned into dinner meetings. Dinner meetings had evolved into weekend getaways. Within 6 months, she'd fallen completely, hopelessly in love with him. Daniel had proposed on a yacht in the Mediterranean, with fireworks spelling out "Marry Me" across the night sky. The ring had been a 10-carat diamond that cost more than her childhood home. Every woman in New York had envied her. Emma Clark, the nobody from nowhere, had captured the heart of one of America's most eligible bachelors. Except none of it had been real. The woman in the shadows. Emma's hands shook as she scrolled up through the message thread, her stomach churning with each revelation. The messages went back 18 months, starting just 6 months after Daniel had proposed. The contact was saved simply as V, but Emma knew exactly who it was. Victoria Ashford, Daniel's childhood friend, the daughter of his father's business partner, the woman who had always looked at Emma with barely concealed contempt at family dinners. The woman Daniel had assured her was just like a sister. The messages painted a picture so vile that Emma wanted to scream. Victoria and Daniel had been planning this from the beginning. The courtship, the proposal, the careful cultivation of Emma's trust. All of it had been an elaborate con. They'd needed Emma to sign over the shares of Thornton Industries that Daniel's grandfather had left her in his will just 3 months ago. Old Edward Thornton had shocked everyone when he'd left 15% of the company to Emma, his grandson's fiancée, bypassing his own son Richard entirely. He'd told Emma privately, just days before he died, that she reminded him of his late wife. Hardworking, genuine, and the only person in this family who gives a damn about something other than money. Emma had been overwhelmed, humbled, and terrified by the responsibility. Daniel had been furious, though he'd hidden it well. He'd claimed he was happy for her, that his grandfather had clearly seen what he'd always known, that Emma was special. But the messages told a different story. The old fool gave her 15%. One message from Daniel read, 15% that should have been mine. But don't worry, baby. Once we're married, I'll convince her to transfer it to a joint account. Then we'll have everything. We can push my father out, take full control, and finally be together the way we should have been from the start. Victoria's response. What if she won't transfer it? What if she suspects something? Daniel, she won't. Emma's too in love to question anything. And even if she does, we'll have the prenup. I've had my lawyers draft it so tightly that she'll walk away with nothing if we divorce. Either way, we win. The documents of destruction. Emma's breath came in short, painful gasps as she continued reading. The plan was meticulous. Tonight, after the engagement party, Daniel was supposed to present her with routine paperwork, documents that would transfer her shares into a joint trust controlled by both of them. But the fine print, which Daniel knew Emma wouldn't read carefully in her champagne-soaked happiness, would actually give Daniel sole control. Victoria's father would then buy out Richard Thornton's shares, and together, Daniel and Victoria would own 70% of the company. Then what? Victoria had texted. We stay married to other people forever? Of course not, Daniel had replied. Give it 6 months after the wedding. I'll manufacture a reason to divorce her. An affair, maybe. Make her look like the villain. She'll be so humiliated she'll disappear back to whatever small town she crawled out of. Then you divorce Marcus, and we'll finally have everything we've always deserved. The company, the money, the power, and each other. Marcus, Victoria's husband of 5 years, a gentle artist who adored her. Another casualty in their twisted game. Emma looked up at her reflection in the gilded bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at her wore a silver Valentino gown that cost more than a car, diamonds dripping from her ears and throat. Her dark hair swept into an elegant updo. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale. But fairy tales were lies. She'd been cast as the princess, but she was really just the fool. The performance begins. A sharp knock on the bathroom door made Emma jump. Emma? Sweetheart? Are you all right in there? Daniel's voice was warm, concerned. Every inch the devoted fiancé. You've been in there a while. Everyone's asking for you. Emma stared at the door, her mind racing. She could burst out right now, throw the phone in his face, scream the truth to all 200 guests currently sipping vintage Dom Perignon in the ballroom. She could watch his perfect facade crumble, watch Victoria's porcelain mask crack, expose them both for the vipers they were. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the memory of her mother's voice from childhood. Baby girl, revenge is a dish best served cold. Or maybe it was the sudden, crystalline clarity that came with having your heart ripped out, the clarity that allowed you to think strategically instead of emotionally. If she exposed them now, she'd get temporary satisfaction. But Daniel's lawyers were too good. He'd find a way to spin it, to keep the shares, to paint her as unstable. She'd lose everything and gain nothing but pity. No, if they wanted to play games, she'd play. But she'd play to win. Emma carefully deleted the message thread from Daniel's notification screen, leaving no trace that she'd seen anything. She took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and fixed her lipstick with steady hands. When she looked in the mirror again, her face was serene, radiant even. The mask was perfect. She opened the door with a brilliant smile. Daniel stood there, impossibly handsome in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. His blue eyes filled with false concern. There you are, he said, reaching for her hand. I was worried. I'm sorry, Emma said, her voice light and happy. She held up his phone. You left this on the counter. I heard it buzz and thought it might be important, but it was just a spam message. She watched his eyes flicker with relief that she'd seen nothing incriminating. You're an angel, he said, pocketing the phone and pulling her close. He kissed her forehead, and Emma forced herself not to recoil. Ready to go dazzle our guests? Absolutely, Emma replied, linking her arm through his. After all, tonight's the beginning of our future together. I can't wait to see what comes next. The irony of her words was lost on Daniel. He grinned, that megawatt smile that had once made her knees weak, and led her back toward the ballroom. As they walked through the penthouse, Emma's mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating, planning. The party of pretenders. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a fairy tale brought to life. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across tables adorned with white roses and gold candelabras. A 12-piece orchestra played soft jazz in the corner. The guest list read like a who's who of New York's elite. Politicians, celebrities, business moguls, all gathered to celebrate the union of Daniel Thornton and Emma Clark. Victoria Ashford stood near the champagne fountain, resplendent in a blood-red gown that hugged every curve. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves down her back, and her green eyes sparkled with malicious amusement as she watched Emma and Daniel enter. Her husband Marcus stood beside her, oblivious, one hand resting gently on the small of her back. Emma met Victoria's gaze across the room and smiled sweetly, lifting her champagne glass in a small toast. Victoria's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, a micro-expression of confusion. She'd expected tears, perhaps, or absence. Not this radiant confidence. Good, Emma thought. Let her wonder. Emma, Daniel, Richard Thornton, Daniel's father, approached with his wife Constance. Richard was a silver-haired shark in an Armani suit, his eyes calculating even as he smiled. Beautiful party. Though I still think Father's decision to include Emma in the company shares was highly unusual. Dad? Daniel said with a laugh that sounded genuine to everyone except Emma. Grandfather was a romantic. He wanted Emma to feel like part of the family. And she is family now. Indeed, Constance said coolly, air-kissing Emma's cheeks. Though, darling, that does remind me. Have you had a chance to review the paperwork Daniel mentioned? The trust documents? It's really just a formality to protect both of you, but it should be handled sooner rather than later. So they were all in on it. The whole Thornton family. Emma's smile never wavered. Actually, I've been thinking about those shares a lot lately, she said, watching Daniel's expression carefully. Mr. Thornton, Edward, he told me something interesting before he died. He said the person who controls Thornton Industries controls the future. And he trusted me with part of that future. Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, well, Father could be sentimental in his old age. I think his mind was perfectly clear, Emma interrupted gently. And I want to honor his trust in me. So I've decided I want to be more active in the company. Learn the business from the inside. Maybe even take a seat on the board. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's hand tightened painfully on her waist. Sweetheart, that's wonderful ambition, but you're already so busy with wedding planning. I can manage both, Emma said brightly. After all, I managed to work full-time while putting myself through business school. I think I can handle a board meeting or two. Don't you, darling? She turned to face him, her eyes wide and innocent, daring him to object. Daniel's smile was strained. Of course. We'll discuss it later. Tonight is for celebrating. But Emma saw the flash of panic in his eyes, saw the way Victoria was staring at her with dawning alarm from across the room. They thought they were the only players in this game. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The midnight revelation. The party lasted until midnight. Emma played her role flawlessly, the blushing bride-to-be, the grateful newcomer to New York society. The woman so desperately in love that she couldn't take her eyes off her fiancé. She danced with Daniel, laughed at his jokes, and graciously accepted congratulations from people who'd never given her the time of day before she'd acquired 15% of a billion-dollar company. As the last guests departed, Daniel pulled her aside into a private sitting room off the main ballroom. Victoria was already there, along with Richard and a man Emma didn't recognize. Sharp-suited, carrying a leather briefcase. Emma, Daniel said, his voice honey-smooth. This is James Morrison, the family attorney. I know it's late, but since you mentioned wanting to be more involved in the company, we thought tonight would be perfect to handle that paperwork we discussed. Get everything in order before the wedding. James opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick stack of documents. Miss Clark, these are standard trust documents. They'll place your shares in a joint marital trust with Daniel, which is common practice for married couples with significant assets. It protects you both. Emma took the documents, flipping through them slowly. She could feel the tension in the room, the four of them watching her like hawks. This says Daniel would be the primary trustee, she noted, her voice curious rather than accusatory. What does that mean exactly? Just that I'd handle the day-to-day management, Daniel said quickly. You'd still own the shares, sweetheart. This just streamlines decision-making. Emma looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. You know what? I think I'd like my own lawyer to review this first, just to make sure I understand everything. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Emma, Richard said, his voice hard. This is a family matter. We don't need outside. Mr. Thornton, Emma interrupted, her voice still sweet but with a steel underneath that made him stop mid-sentence. I'm not family yet, not legally, and 15% of Thornton Industries is worth roughly $250 million based on the last valuation. I think that's worth a second opinion, don't you? She stood, smoothing her dress. I'll have my attorney review these documents, and we can schedule a proper meeting to discuss them. In the meantime, I'm exhausted. Daniel, darling, would you call me a car? Daniel's face had gone pale. Emma, you're being unreasonable. Am I? Emma's voice was still light, but her eyes had gone cold. Daniel, I love you, but I'm not an idiot. If these documents are really as simple and beneficial as you say, then my lawyer will confirm that and I'll happily sign. But if you're pressuring me to sign something without proper review, well, she let the sentence hang, loaded with unspoken threat. Victoria stepped forward, her mask of friendliness slipping. Emma, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. No, Emma said quietly, looking directly at Victoria. I don't think I am. In fact, I think I'm understanding the situation perfectly for the first time. She turned back to Daniel, and for just a moment, she let him see the truth in her eyes, that she knew everything. His face drained of color. Good night, everyone, Emma said. Thank you for a truly unforgettable evening. She walked out of the Plaza Hotel with her head high, leaving behind a room full of people who just realized that the naive secretary they'd underestimated was gone. In her place stood someone far more dangerous, someone who knew their every secret, someone who was going to make them pay for every lie, every manipulation, every moment of betrayal. As Emma stepped into the waiting car, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Miss Clark, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I was Edward Thornton's private attorney, separate from the family's legal team. He asked me to contact you if the family ever tried to pressure you regarding your shares. We need to talk. Immediately. Emma smiled in the darkness of the car. Edward Thornton, it seemed, had known his family far better than they'd realized. And he'd left her more than just shares. He'd left her a weapon. The game was just beginning, and Emma was done playing defense. To be continued. Will Emma uncover the full extent of Daniel and Victoria's betrayal? What secrets did Edward Thornton leave behind? And how far will Emma go to claim her revenge? Don't miss Part 2, Heartbreak and Revenge. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see what happens next. Next, 17:21 Rose and Retribution. The CEO's secretary. Emma didn't sleep that night. She sat in her modest Brooklyn apartment, the one she'd kept even after Daniel had insisted she could move into his penthouse, and stared at her phone. The message from Sarah Mitchell glowed on the screen like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. At 6 a.m., as the first gray light of dawn crept through her windows, Emma finally dialed the number. Sarah answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. Miss Clark. The woman's voice was professional but warm, with an underlying urgency. Thank you for calling. I know last night must have been difficult. How did you know about last night? Emma asked, her voice rough from unshed tears. Because I know the Thornton family. I worked with Edward for 35 years, and I watched what they did to his company, his values, everything he built. When he decided to leave you those shares, he told me exactly what would happen. He said they'd try to manipulate you, pressure you, maybe even threaten you. He wanted you to have protection. Emma's heart clenched. He knew? He knew what Daniel was. He suspected. Edward was dying, Miss Clark, but his mind was sharp until the very end. He'd noticed how Daniel looked at Victoria Ashford, how the family dynamics shifted when money was discussed. He didn't have proof, but he had instincts honed over 60 years in business. That's why he left you the shares, not just because he liked you, but because he wanted someone outside the family corruption to have power. Sarah paused, and Emma could hear papers rustling. I need you to come to my office today. I have documents that Edward left in my care. Documents that the family doesn't know exist. Documents that might change everything. The hidden files. Sarah Mitchell's law office was in a discreet brownstone in the Upper East Side, far from the gleaming corporate towers where the Thornton family attorneys worked. Emma arrived at 9 a.m., wearing jeans and a sweater, her engagement ring conspicuously absent from her finger. She'd left it on her bathroom counter, unable to bear the weight of its lies. Sarah was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled into a neat bun. She greeted Emma with a firm handshake and led her into a wood-paneled office that smelled of old books and expensive coffee. "Before we begin," Sarah said, settling behind her desk, "I need to know, are you still planning to marry Daniel Thornton?" Emma laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. "I found text messages last night between Daniel and Victoria Ashford. They've been having an affair for 18 months. The entire relationship with me was a con to get control of the shares Edward left me." Sarah's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps, or vindication. "Then you're ready to hear the truth." She pulled out a thick manila folder and slid it across the desk. Edward Thornton spent the last year of his life conducting a private investigation into his own family. What he found disgusted him. Emma opened the folder, and her breath caught. Inside were bank statements, emails, photographs, legal documents, a paper trail of corruption that went back years. The web of deceit. "Richard Thornton," Sarah began, "has been embezzling from the company for over a decade. Small amounts at first, then larger as he got bolder. He's funneled approximately $40 million into offshore accounts." Emma's eyes widened as she scanned the bank statements. Shell corporations in the Cayman Islands, wire transfers labeled as consulting fees that went to companies that didn't exist. "Daniel knew," Sarah continued. "In fact, he helped. About 5 years ago, when Daniel was brought into the company's executive team, Richard taught him the system. They've been stealing together ever since." "But the company is worth billions," Emma said, confused. "Why would they need to steal?" "Greed isn't about need, Miss Clark. It's about power and entitlement. But there's more." Sarah pulled out another document. "Victoria Ashford's father, James Ashford, is Richard's partner in this scheme. They've been planning a hostile takeover of Thornton Industries for years. The plan was to bleed the company slowly, devalue the stock, and then buy out the remaining shareholders at rock-bottom prices." Emma felt sick. "Edward's shares, the ones he left me, they're the key, aren't they?" "Exactly. With your 15% plus Richard's 30%, plus the 20% that James Ashford has quietly acquired through various proxies, they'd have 65%. Complete control. They could force out the other shareholders, take the company private, and do whatever they wanted. Edward knew that if those shares fell into family hands, Thornton Industries would be gutted within 5 years. The dead man's weapon. Emma looked up from the documents, her mind reeling. Why didn't Edward go to the police? Why leave this for me? Sarah's smile was sad. Because he was dying, and he knew that a legal battle would destroy what was left of the company and his legacy. But more than that, he believed in you. He told me, "Sarah, that girl has steel in her spine. She's been underestimated her whole life, but she's a fighter. Give her the ammunition, and she'll know what to do with it." Tears pricked Emma's eyes. Edward Thornton, the grandfather she'd never had seen her when no one else had. Not as a trophy or a pawn, but as a person with worth and strength. "So what do I do with this?" Emma asked, gesturing to the explosive documents spread across the desk. "That depends on what you want," Sarah replied. "You could go to the SEC, the FBI. Richard and Daniel would go to prison. The company would likely survive, but it would be scandal-ridden for years. Or," she paused significantly, "or," Emma prompted, "or you could use this as leverage. Play the game better than they do. Take control of the company yourself, force them out, and build something worthy of Edward's legacy. It's riskier, but it's more permanent." Emma sat back, her mind racing through possibilities. Prison would be satisfying, but Sarah was right. It would destroy the company and all the innocent employees who depended on it. But taking control, that would require cunning, strategy, and a willingness to fight dirty. She thought of Daniel's smug face, of Victoria's contemptuous smirk, of Richard's barely concealed greed. She thought of all the times she'd been dismissed as just the secretary, all the condescending comments about her background, her education, her worth. "I want control," Emma said quietly, her voice hard as diamonds. "I want them to lose everything they've stolen. And I want them to know it was me who took it from them." Sarah Mitchell smiled, a fierce expression that transformed her grandmother's face into something almost predatory. "Then let's build you an empire." The gathering of allies. Over the next week, Emma moved like a ghost through her own life. She went to work at Thornton Industries, smiled at Daniel when he texted her sweet nothings, and avoided his attempts to discuss the paperwork. She was pleasant but distant, claiming wedding stress and exhaustion. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, she was assembling an army. Sarah introduced her to Marcus Chen, a forensic accountant who specialized in corporate fraud. Marcus was brilliant, ruthless, and, conveniently, had a personal grudge against Richard Thornton, who'd once stolen credit for Marcus's work and gotten him fired from a previous firm. "I've been waiting years for someone to take down the Thorntons," Marcus said when they met in Sarah's office. He was young, maybe 30, with sharp features and sharper eyes. "Give me a week with these documents, and I'll have a case so airtight that God himself couldn't create reasonable doubt." Emma also reached out to Jennifer Park, an investigative journalist who'd been trying to expose corporate corruption in New York for years. Jennifer had written several pieces about suspicious activity at various tech companies, but she'd never been able to get enough evidence to publish anything definitive. "If you can prove what you're telling me," Jennifer said over coffee at a nondescript diner in Queens, "this would be the biggest story of my career, but I need ironclad proof. These people have lawyers that could bury me." "You'll have your proof," Emma promised, "but I need you to wait. When the time comes, I'll give you an exclusive. Every detail, every document. But it has to be on my timeline." Jennifer studied her. This young woman who looked like she should be planning bridal showers but had the calculating eyes of a general planning a war. "You've changed," Jennifer observed. "I interviewed you 6 months ago for a puff piece about the Thornton engagement. You were sweet, a little naive, completely in love. What happened?" "I woke up," Emma said simply. "The confrontation with Victoria." 10 days after the engagement party, Emma received a text from Victoria. "Lunch? We need to talk. Just us girls." Emma stared at the message, recognizing it for what it was, an attempt to gauge how much Emma knew to manipulate her back into compliance. Victoria probably thought she could charm or intimidate Emma into signing those documents. Emma replied, "The Ivy, 1 p.m. See you there." The Ivy was a trendy restaurant in Midtown, the kind of place where Manhattan's elite went to see and be seen. Emma arrived 15 minutes early, wearing a simple black dress and the diamond earrings Daniel had given her for Christmas. Bought, she now realized, with stolen money. Victoria arrived exactly on time, dressed in designer everything, her blonde hair perfect, her smile sharp. She air-kissed Emma's cheeks and sat down, ordering a salad and sparkling water with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. "Emma," Victoria began, her tone dripping with false concern, "I've been worried about you. Daniel says you've been distant since the party. And this business with wanting your own lawyer to review the trust documents, it's caused some tension in the family." "Has it?" Emma asked mildly, sipping her water. "Darling, I understand. You're not used to how these things work in families like ours. But you need to trust Daniel. He loves you, and he only wants what's best for you." Emma set down her glass carefully. "Victoria, can I ask you something? How long have you been sleeping with my fiancé?" The color drained from Victoria's face. For a moment, her perfect mask slipped, revealing naked shock underneath. What are you? That's absurd." 18 months, Emma continued conversationally. "That's how long the text messages go back. Though I suspect it's been longer than that. Maybe even before he started dating me." Victoria recovered quickly, her expression hardening. "I don't know what you think you saw." "I saw everything," Emma said quietly. The affair. The plan to steal my shares. The scheme to push out Richard and take over the company. All of it. Victoria stared at her, and Emma watched the calculation happening behind those green eyes. Deny or admit. Threaten or bargain. If you know, Victoria said finally, her voice low and venomous, then you know you can't win. Daniel will destroy you in court. You'll lose the shares, the company, everything. You're out of your depth, Emma. You're a secretary playing dress-up in a world you don't understand. Emma smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. You're wrong about me, Victoria. You've been wrong from the beginning. You saw a poor girl from nowhere and assumed I was stupid. But being underestimated, that's my greatest advantage. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. I know about the embezzlement. I know about the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the whole scheme. And I have documents that prove all of it. Victoria's face went white. You're bluffing. Am I? Want to test that theory? Because I have forensic accountants, lawyers, and a very eager journalist all waiting for me to give them the green light. One phone call, Victoria, and your father goes to prison. Daniel goes to prison. Richard goes to prison. And you? Emma smiled. You'll be the socialite wife who knew nothing, but everyone will know better. You'll be a pariah. What do you want? Victoria hissed. I want you to leave Daniel. Tell him it's over, that you can't do this anymore. Make him think you're backing out of the plan. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'll release everything to the SEC tomorrow. But if you do exactly what I say, I might let you walk away from this without criminal charges. Your father and Daniel won't be so lucky, but you could escape. Victoria's hands shook as she gripped her water glass. You can't prove I knew about the embezzlement. Maybe not, but I can prove you knew about the affair, the manipulation, the scheme to defraud me. That's conspiracy, Victoria. And it's enough to destroy you socially, even if you don't go to prison. Can you imagine? Victoria Ashford, the woman who helped her lover con his fiancée. How will that play at the country club? Emma stood, smoothing her dress. You have 24 hours to end it with Daniel. If you don't, I burn everything down. Choose wisely. She walked out of the restaurant, leaving Victoria sitting alone, her perfect facade finally crumbling. The unraveling. Victoria, it turned out, was a survivor above all else. That night, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. We need to talk. Now. My place. Emma arrived at Daniel's penthouse an hour later, her heart pounding but her expression calm. She found him in his home office, pacing like a caged animal, his usually perfect hair disheveled. What did you say to Victoria? He demanded the moment Emma walked in. Hello to you too, darling, Emma said coolly. Don't play games with me, Emma. Victoria called me in tears. She said you accused her of having an affair with me, that you threatened her with some kind of documents. What the hell is going on? Emma sat down on the leather couch, crossing her legs elegantly. I found the text messages, Daniel. I know everything. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel stared at her, and she watched the lies form and die on his lips as he realized there was no way to talk himself out of this. How long have you known? He asked finally. Since the engagement party. Since you left your phone in the bathroom and Victoria's message came through. Daniel sank into his desk chair, running his hands through his hair. Emma, listen. No, you listen, Emma interrupted, her voice sharp as glass. You used me. You seduced me, proposed to me, made me believe I was loved, all so you could steal shares that were never yours. You were going to marry me, take everything I had, and then divorce me and humiliate me. Did you even feel anything for me? Was any of it real? Daniel looked at her, and for a moment, she thought she saw something like remorse in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. It was business, Emma. Nothing personal. Nothing personal? Emma laughed, a broken sound. You made me fall in love with you. That's pretty damn personal. You'll get over it, Daniel said dismissively. You're young. You'll find someone else. You're right, Emma said quietly. I will get over it. But you're going to regret every lie you told me. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Emma stood, walking toward the door. The engagement is off, obviously. You can explain to your family and friends however you want. But Daniel, you should know, I'm not signing anything. Those shares are mine, and I'm going to use them. Use them how? Daniel demanded, standing up. Emma turned back, her smile cold and beautiful. You'll see. Give Victoria my regards. She walked out, and this time she didn't look back. The board meeting ambush. 2 weeks later, Emma walked into the Thornton Industries boardroom like she owned it, because in a very real sense she did. The monthly board meeting was supposed to be routine. Financial reports, strategic planning, rubber-stamping Richard's decisions. Emma had other plans. She'd used her 15% stake to demand a seat at the table, citing the company bylaws that Sarah had helped her interpret. Richard had tried to block her, but the bylaws were clear. Any shareholder with more than 10% ownership had a right to board participation. The boardroom fell silent when Emma entered, wearing a sharp gray suit that meant business. Her hair pulled back severely, her expression unreadable. Daniel sat at the far end of the table, looking haggard. They hadn't spoken since their confrontation. Richard sat at the head, his expression thunderous. Miss Clark, Richard said coldly. How kind of you to join us. Mr. Thornton, Emma replied pleasantly, taking an empty seat. Thank you for accommodating my request to attend. I have some concerns about the company's financial management that I'd like to discuss. Richard's jaw tightened. This is not the appropriate forum for personal grievances. I'm not here with personal grievances, Emma interrupted smoothly. I'm here with forensic accounting reports that show systematic embezzlement of company funds over the past 10 years. I'm here with documentation of $40 million in missing assets. And I'm here with questions about why the board hasn't been informed of any of this. The room erupted. Board members began talking over each other, some demanding to see the documents, others insisting this was slander. Richard stood up, his face red with rage. This is outrageous. Security. Sit down, Mr. Thornton, came a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Sarah Mitchell entering, followed by Marcus Chun and 2 federal agents. FBI, Securities and Exchange Commission. We have warrants to seize financial records and to question several individuals regarding allegations of corporate fraud, embezzlement, and securities violations. Emma watched as Daniel's face drained of all color, as Richard began blustering about lawyers, as chaos descended on the boardroom. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no joy, just a cold, hollow sense of justice being served. One of the agents approached her. Miss Clark? We'll need to speak with you as well. But Agent Morrison wanted me to thank you for bringing this information forward. Your cooperation has been invaluable. Emma nodded mutely. She watched as Richard and Daniel were led out of the boardroom. Richard still protesting, Daniel silent and defeated. As Daniel passed her, he met her eyes for just a moment. You destroyed everything, he whispered.
No, Emma replied quietly.
I saved what your family was destroying. There's a difference. The aftermath. The news broke that evening. Jennifer Park's article was devastating, detailed, thoroughly sourced, with copies of damning documents attached. Thornton Industries, a legacy of fraud, read the headline. Within hours, it had been picked up by every major news outlet in the country. Emma sat in her Brooklyn apartment, watching the news coverage with Sarah beside her. The TV showed footage of Richard and Daniel being led into federal buildings, of shareholders panicking, of legal experts analyzing the case. You did it, Sarah said quietly. Edward would be proud. It doesn't feel like victory, Emma admitted. Her voice was hollow. I loved him, Sarah. I really loved him. And it was all a lie. Sarah squeezed her hand. The love was real, dear. Your love was real. His deception doesn't diminish what you felt. It just shows what you're capable of feeling. That's not weakness. That's strength. Emma's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You bitch. I hope you're happy. My life is over because of you.
Victoria.
Emma deleted it without responding. She had no energy left for Victoria's drama. Another text came through, this one from Marcus Chen. SEC is moving forward with criminal charges. This is going to be the case of the decade. Also, the board wants to meet with you tomorrow. They're talking about interim leadership of the company. Just FYI. Emma stared at that message for a long moment. Interim leadership. They wanted her to run Thornton Industries. She thought of Edward, of his faith in her, of the steel spine he'd seen when no one else had. She thought of all the employees who'd lose their jobs if the company collapsed, of the legacy that was worth saving even if the family wasn't. Sarah, Emma said slowly, do you think I could actually do it? Run the company. Sarah smiled. I think you just took down one of the most powerful families in New York. Running a company will be easy by comparison. Emma looked out her window at the glittering Manhattan skyline. Somewhere out there, Daniel was sitting in a jail cell, his empire crumbling. Victoria was probably hiring lawyers. Richard was facing decades in prison. And Emma Clark, the girl from nowhere, the underestimated secretary, held the future of a billion-dollar company in her hands. The revenge was complete. But the story was just beginning. To be continued. Will Emma take control of Thornton Industries? What new challenges await her in the corporate world? And is Daniel's downfall really complete? Or does he have one last card to play? Don't miss part 3, the ultimate payback. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see Emma's final transformation. Next 17:24 Rose and Retribution. The CEO's secretary. The Thornton Industries boardroom looked different in the harsh morning light. Emma sat at the head of the table, Edward's seat, the seat Richard had occupied for 15 years, and faced the remaining board members. They looked at her with a mixture of uncertainty, skepticism, and in some cases, barely concealed hostility. Gentlemen, ladies, Emma began, her voice steady despite the butterflies rioting in her stomach. I know this isn't what any of us expected 3 weeks ago, but Thornton Industries is facing an existential crisis, and we need leadership. Stable, untainted leadership. Gerald Morrison, the company's chief financial officer and a board member for 20 years, leaned forward. He was a gray-haired man in his 60s who'd always treated Emma with polite indifference when she was Daniel's secretary. Now his eyes held grudging respect. Miss Clark, no one questions that you did the right thing exposing the fraud. But running a multi-billion-dollar tech company requires experience, connections, and frankly, credibility with our partners and investors. You're what, 27 years old? You have an MBA but no executive experience. The shareholders are already panicking. If we put you in charge, they'll sell in droves. Then let them sell, Emma said calmly. Anyone who wants to abandon ship can go. But I'm betting most of them will stay once they see the plan I have to stabilize and grow this company. She clicked a button on her laptop, and the screen behind her lit up with a presentation. I've spent the last 2 weeks working with Marcus Chen, our new forensic accountant, to trace every dollar that was stolen. We've recovered approximately $28 million so far from accounts that Richard and Daniel hadn't moved yet. That money is going back into R&D and employee retention bonuses. Murmurs of surprise rippled around the table. Helen Yamamoto, head of the technology division, spoke up. That's actually impressive. But what about the structural issues? Richard was siphoning money by inflating vendor contracts. How do we fix that? We renegotiate every contract, Emma replied. I've already started. Marcus identified the shell companies and the vendors who were overcharging us. Some were complicit, some were victims of Richard's scheme. The complicit ones are being terminated and potentially prosecuted. The others are being offered fair contracts at market rates. She clicked to the next slide, showing a restructuring plan. I'm also proposing we bring in Amanda Reeves as our new chief operating officer. The room erupted. Amanda Reeves? Gerald sputtered. The woman Richard fired 3 years ago? The woman Richard fired because she discovered irregularities in the books and asked too many questions, Emma corrected. Amanda is brilliant, experienced, and she has no loyalty to the old regime. She's exactly what we need. She'll never work for us after how Richard treated her, Helen said skeptically. Emma smiled slightly. I already called her. She starts Monday. The board members exchanged glances. This young woman they'd dismissed as Daniel's pretty accessory was systematically dismantling their objections and presenting solutions they hadn't even considered. There's one more thing, Emma continued. I'm not asking to be CEO. Not yet. I know I'm not ready for that, despite what some of you might think I believe. But I am asking to be appointed as interim executive chairwoman, with Amanda as interim CEO. We'll run the company together until the crisis is stabilized, and then the board can make a permanent decision about leadership. The room fell silent. It was a smart compromise. Emma would have oversight and control through her chairwoman position and her shares, but Amanda would handle the day-to-day operations. It gave the company experienced leadership while keeping Emma in a position of power. Gerald was the first to speak. I'll support that motion. One by one, the others nodded their agreement. They didn't have better options, and Emma had proven she was far more formidable than any of them had imagined. Then it's settled, Emma said, allowing herself a small smile. Let's save this company. The prison visit. 3 days after being appointed interim executive chairwoman, Emma did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She went to visit Daniel. He was being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, awaiting trial. His bail had been set at $10 million, which he couldn't make because all his assets had been frozen. The golden boy of New York society was now prisoner number 847392, wearing an orange jumpsuit and looking like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. When Daniel was brought into the visiting room and saw Emma sitting on the other side of the plexiglass divider, his expression went through a rapid series of changes. Shock, anger, hope, and finally, resignation. He picked up the phone. I didn't think you'd come. Neither did I, Emma admitted. She studied him through the glass. Without the expensive suits and the practiced charm, Daniel looked ordinary, almost pathetic. I'm not here to gloat, if that's what you're worried about. Then why are you here? Emma was silent for a moment, trying to articulate feelings she didn't fully understand herself. Because I need closure. I need to understand how someone I thought I knew could be such a complete stranger. Daniel laughed bitterly. You want to understand me? Fine. I'll tell you the truth. Something I've never done before. He leaned closer to the glass. My entire life I was told I was special. I was a Thornton. I had money, looks, privilege. But nothing was ever mine, Emma. Not really. The company was my grandfather's, then my father's. The wealth was inherited. Even my goddamn trust fund was controlled by family lawyers until I turned 30. So you decided to steal what you couldn't earn? Emma asked, her voice hard. I decided to take what should have been mine from the beginning, Daniel corrected. Do you know what it's like to be Edward Thornton's grandson? To be compared to a legend every single day of your life? Nothing I did was ever good enough. And then the old man left 15% of his company to you. To a secretary he barely knew. That should have been mine. So this was about ego, Emma said quietly. Not even about the money. Just about proving you were worthy of a dead man's approval. Don't psychoanalyze me, Daniel snapped. You asked, I'm telling you. Yes, it was about ego. It was about proving I could outsmart everyone. That I could take control. That I could be more than just Edward Thornton's disappointing grandson. And Victoria? Daniel's expression softened slightly, and Emma felt an unexpected pang in her chest. Even now, even in prison, he looked at Victoria's name with something that might have been real affection. Victoria understood me, Daniel said. She grew up the same way I did, in the shadow of powerful parents, always being told she was special but never being given real power. We were supposed to marry, you know. Our parents arranged it when we were teenagers. But then her father decided she should marry Marcus instead, for some business alliance. And my father decided I should be single longer to play the field and build the Thornton brand. So you decided to betray her husband and your fiancé, Emma summarized. We decided to take what we wanted, Daniel said. And it would have worked if you hadn't been smarter than we thought. Emma stood up. This conversation wasn't giving her the closure she'd hoped for. If anything, she felt emptier than before. You're going to prison for a long time, Daniel. 10 to 20 years, the prosecutors say. And when you get out, there won't be anything waiting for you. No company, no family fortune, no Victoria. I know, Daniel said quietly. But there's one thing I need you to know, Emma, before you go. What? He met her eyes through the glass, and for the first time, she saw something genuine in his expression. When I proposed to you, when I bought that ring and staged those fireworks, part of me did love you. A small part, maybe, and not enough to stop me from using you. But it was there. You were kind and real and nothing like the fake socialites I'd grown up around. In another life, if I'd been a better person, I think I could have really loved you. Tears pricked Emma's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. That doesn't make it better, Daniel. It makes it worse. She hung up the phone and walked away, leaving him sitting alone behind the glass. She didn't look back. The snake in the garden. If Emma thought taking control of Thornton Industries would be smooth sailing after the board meeting, she was quickly proven wrong. 2 weeks into her new role, she discovered that betrayal had more heads than a hydra. It started with small things. Documents that went missing from her office, meetings that were scheduled without her knowledge, whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Emma felt the undercurrent of resistance but couldn't pinpoint the source. Then Marcus came to her office one evening, his expression grim. We have a problem. Emma looked up from the financial reports she'd been reviewing. It was 9 p.m., and most of the building was empty. What kind of problem? Someone's been accessing the secure server where we stored all the evidence of Richard's embezzlement. Someone with high-level clearance made copies of sealed files 3 days ago. Emma's blood ran cold. Who? The logs show it was your account. But I'm betting you didn't do it. Of course I didn't. Who has access to my login credentials? Marcus pulled out his tablet, showing her a security analysis. Anyone who could have installed a keylogger on your computer or cloned your security badge, which means it's someone with regular access to your office. Emma thought rapidly through the possibilities. Her assistant Claire? No, Claire was new, hired after the scandal broke, and Emma had vetted her thoroughly. Gerald Morrison? He had access but no motive. He'd been supportive of the changes. Helen Yamamoto? Possible. But Helen seemed genuinely committed to the company's recovery. There's something else, Marcus said grimly. I've been tracking some unusual stock movements. Someone's been buying up Thornton Industries shares through shell companies, the same kind of shell companies Richard used for his embezzlement. Small purchases spread out to avoid attention, but they're adding up. Someone's trying to acquire a controlling stake. Who? I don't know yet. The companies are registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. It'll take time to trace the actual owners. But Emma, whoever's doing this has serious money and sophisticated legal help. This isn't some opportunistic investor. This is someone with a grudge. Emma stood up and walked to her office window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Victoria, she said quietly. You think Victoria Ashford is behind this? She has the motive. I destroyed her plans and humiliated her. She has the money. Her father's wealth hasn't been touched by the investigation, and she's still technically his heir. And she's smart enough to realize that she can't attack me legally or she'll end up like Daniel and Richard. But if she could take control of the company through a hostile takeover, she'd force you out and destroy everything you've built, Marcus finished. That's actually pretty brilliant revenge. We need proof, Emma said. Can you trace those shell companies? I can try, but it'll take weeks, maybe months. And in the meantime, she could keep accumulating shares. Emma turned back to Marcus, her expression hardening. Then we need to flush her out. We need to make her reveal herself before she has enough shares to matter. How? Emma smiled. A cold, calculating expression that would have made Daniel proud or terrified. By giving her exactly what she thinks she wants. The trap is set. The next day, Emma called a press conference. The media room at Thornton Industries was packed with journalists, all eager for the latest development in the scandal that had dominated business news for weeks. Emma stood at the podium, looking every inch the powerful executive in her tailored navy suit and pearl earrings. "Thank you all for coming. I have an important announcement about the future of Thornton Industries." Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. "As you know, the company has been through a traumatic period. The betrayal by former leadership was devastating not just financially, but morally. We've worked hard over the past month to stabilize operations, recover stolen assets, and restore faith in our brand." Emma paused for effect. "But I've come to realize that the company needs more than just stability. It needs transformation, and that transformation requires new perspectives and new partnerships." She clicked to a slide showing a mock-up of a business plan. "I'm announcing today that Thornton Industries will be seeking a strategic partner, either a merger with a compatible tech firm or a significant investment from a private equity fund. This will provide the capital and expertise needed to take the company to the next level." The room erupted with questions. Emma fielded them calmly, providing just enough detail to make the announcement sound legitimate without committing to anything specific. "Who are you in talks with?" one reporter shouted. "Several parties have expressed interest, but no deals are finalized. We're open to offers from anyone who shares our vision and our values." She didn't mention that this was entirely a bluff. There were no merger talks, no interested private equity firms. This was bait, carefully designed to lure Victoria into the open. If Victoria believed that Thornton Industries was looking for outside investment, she'd have to move quickly to acquire more shares before a deal was struck. And when she did, she'd have to reveal herself. The Queen's Gambit. It took exactly 72 hours for Victoria to take the bait. Emma was in a late-night meeting with Amanda Reeves, discussing the new R&D initiatives, when Marcus burst into her office without knocking. "She made her move," he said breathlessly, holding up his tablet. "Victoria just filed with the SEC. She's declaring ownership of 23% of Thornton Industries stock, acquired through various entities over the past month. And she's calling for an emergency shareholder meeting to vote on new board leadership." Emma and Amanda exchanged glances. 23%, Emma said slowly. "Combined with the 15% I have, that's only 38%. She'd need at least 35% more to force a vote of no confidence." "She doesn't have it yet," Marcus confirmed. "But she's made her play public. She's counting on other shareholders being nervous enough about your leadership to join her." "And she might be right," Amanda said grimly. "A lot of institutional investors are still skittish about the scandal. If Victoria positions herself as the stable, experienced alternative to the 27-year-old interim chair, she might convince them to side with her." Emma stood up and walked to her window, a habit she'd developed since taking Edward's office. "When's the shareholder meeting?" "She's requested it for 2 weeks from now. The board has to grant it since she has over 20% ownership." 2 weeks, Emma murmured. Then she turned back to Marcus and Amanda, and they both saw the fierce determination in her eyes. "That's plenty of time." "Time for what?" Amanda asked. "Time to remind everyone exactly who Victoria Ashford is. And time to make sure she regrets ever declaring war on me. Exposing the conspiracy." Emma spent the next week working around the clock with a team that had grown to include Sarah Mitchell, Marcus Chen, Amanda Reeves, and Jennifer Park, the investigative journalist. They had one goal: build an irrefutable case that Victoria had known about and participated in Daniel and Richard's schemes. The problem was that Victoria had been careful. Her text messages with Daniel had been on encrypted apps. She'd never put her name on any financial documents. She'd been the puppet master pulling strings from the shadows, and she'd done it cleverly enough to have plausible deniability. But everyone makes mistakes, and Victoria's mistake was hubris. Marcus was the one who found it, buried deep in the financial records they'd recovered from Richard's seized computers. "Emma, you need to see this," he said, pulling up a spreadsheet on his laptop. It was a detailed financial model showing the projected outcomes of various scenarios. What would happen if Daniel married Emma and got control of her shares? What would happen if they pushed Richard out early versus waiting? What would happen if they had to resort to a hostile takeover instead of a quiet coup? This is Victoria's work, Marcus said, pointing to the metadata. See the username? V.Ashford. She created this document 14 months ago, before Daniel even proposed to you. This proves she was involved in planning the whole scheme from the beginning. Emma stared at the screen, her heart racing. This is it. This is the proof we need. There's more, Marcus continued, scrolling down. She modeled different scenarios for getting rid of you after the wedding. Look at this tab, it's labeled Exit Strategies. She literally mapped out how to frame you for infidelity to expedite the divorce. Emma felt sick reading the clinical, calculated plans for her destruction. But she also felt a cold satisfaction. Victoria had been so confident in her superiority that she documented her own guilt. Jennifer, Emma said, turning to the journalist who'd been waiting in the corner of the office. How fast can you write this story? Jennifer Park smiled. Give me 24 hours and exclusive access to all the documents. This is going to be bigger than the original fraud story. The article that changed everything. The article dropped like a nuclear bomb at 6 a.m. on the morning of the shareholder meeting. The woman behind the throne, how Victoria Ashford orchestrated Thornton Industries' downfall, read the headline. Jennifer had outdone herself. The article was meticulous, sourced with documents, timeline analyses, and expert commentary. It laid out Victoria's role in the conspiracy with devastating clarity. The financial models, the planning documents, the evidence of her 18-month affair with Daniel, all of it exposed for the world to see. But the coup de grace was the final section, where Jennifer revealed Victoria's current attempt to take over the company. Having failed to steal Thornton Industries through deception, Jennifer wrote, Victoria Ashford is now attempting to acquire it through aggressive stock purchases and a hostile shareholder revolt. This reporter has to wonder, how many times must we watch someone try to steal what they couldn't earn before we recognize a pattern? By 8 a.m., the story had been picked up by every major news outlet. By 9 a.m., Victoria's lawyers were issuing furious denials and threatening lawsuits. By 10 a.m., the SEC had announced they were expanding their investigation to include Victoria Ashford as a potential co-conspirator. And by 11 a.m., when the shareholder meeting was scheduled to begin, Victoria's support had completely evaporated. The shareholder meeting. The meeting was held in the company's largest conference center, which could hold 500 people. Every major shareholder was there, either in person or via video conference. The air was electric with tension and anticipation. Emma sat at the head table with Amanda and the board members. Victoria sat in the front row of the audience, looking like she'd been carved from ice. Her designer suit was impeccable, her hair perfect, but her eyes were the eyes of a cornered animal. Gerald Morrison, as the senior board member, called the meeting to order. We're here today because Ms. Victoria Ashford has requested an emergency vote on the current leadership of Thornton Industries. Ms. Ashford, you have the floor. Victoria stood up, and Emma had to admire her composure. Despite the morning's devastating article, Victoria's voice was steady as she addressed the room. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I've requested this meeting because I believe Thornton Industries is heading in the wrong direction under its current leadership. Emma Clark, while well-intentioned, is inexperienced and unqualified to lead a company of this magnitude. Her tenure has been marked by instability and scandal. Scandal that you helped create, came a voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned. Marcus Chin stood up holding a tablet. Ms. Ashford, are you denying that you created the financial models that planned Emma Clark's exploitation? Are you denying that you participated in the conspiracy to defraud this company? Those allegations are unproven and defamatory, Victoria shot back. My lawyers. Your lawyers can't defend against documentary evidence, Emma said, standing up. She'd been waiting for this moment, preparing for it. Everything in this morning's article is true, and you know it. You weren't just Daniel's mistress. You were his partner in crime. You planned every detail of how to use me, steal from this company, and betray your own husband. Victoria's perfect facade finally cracked. "You self-righteous little bitch," she hissed. "You think you're so noble, so pure? You destroyed Daniel, you destroyed Richard, and now you're trying to destroy me. But I have 23% of this company, and these shareholders know that you're a liability." "Actually," came another voice, "you have 0%. Sarah Mitchell walked into the room, accompanied by 2 federal agents. "Ms. Ashford, these agents are here to inform you that all shares purchased through your shell companies in the past month are being seized as part of the ongoing fraud investigation. The SEC has determined that those purchases were made using funds that were derived from the original embezzlement scheme." Victoria's face went white. "That's impossible. I bought those shares with my own money. Money that your father gave you," Sarah continued calmly. "Money that forensic analysis has shown came from the same offshore accounts that Richard Thornton used. Your father was Richard's partner, Ms. Ashford, which means any assets you acquired from him are subject to seizure, including those shares." The room erupted in chaos. Shareholders began shouting questions. Victoria stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The federal agents approached her, speaking in low tones. Emma watched it all with a strange sense of detachment. She'd won. Victoria was finished, her shares seized, her reputation destroyed, her freedom potentially forfeit if the SEC investigation led to criminal charges. But Emma felt no joy in the victory, just a hollow exhaustion. The aftermath 3 months later. The shareholder meeting had ended with a unanimous vote of confidence in Emma's leadership. Victoria had been escorted out by federal agents and hadn't been seen in public since. Daniel and Richard had both pleaded guilty to avoid trial, accepting prison sentences of 12 and 15 years respectively. James Ashford, Victoria's father, was still fighting the charges, but most legal experts predicted he'd lose. Thornton Industries had stabilized. The stock price was recovering. New products were in development. Amanda Reeves had proven to be an exceptional CEO, and together, she and Emma were transforming the company into something Edward Thornton would have been proud of. Emma stood in Edward's, now her office, looking at the portrait of the old man that hung on the wall. "I hope I'm doing right by you," she said softly to the painting. "I think you are," came a voice from the doorway. Emma turned to see Marcus Chun standing there with 2 cups of coffee. Over the past months, Marcus had become more than just her forensic accountant. He'd become a friend, perhaps her only real friend in this strange new world she inhabited. "The board made it official," Marcus said, handing her a coffee. "They're removing the interim from your title. As of today, you're the permanent executive chairwoman of Thornton Industries, youngest chair in the company's history." Emma took the coffee, feeling the weight of the news settle on her shoulders. "I'm not sure I'm ready." "No one's ever ready," Marcus said. "But you've proven you're capable. You took down a corrupt dynasty, saved a company, and turned yourself from a secretary into one of the most powerful businesswomen in New York. That's pretty damn impressive for someone who's not ready." Emma smiled slightly. "When you put it that way." "There's something else," Marcus said, his expression becoming more serious. "I got a call from my contact at the FBI. Daniel wants to see you. He's being transferred to federal prison tomorrow, and he's requested one final visit." Emma's stomach clenched. "Why would he want to see me?" "I don't know. But Emma, you don't owe him anything. If you want to ignore the request." "No," Emma said quietly. "I'll go. I think I need to say goodbye. Really goodbye this time. The final goodbye." The next day, Emma found herself back at the Metropolitan Detention Center, sitting across from Daniel in the same visiting room where they'd spoken months ago. He looked even worse than before, thinner, paler, with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated slouch to his shoulders. "Thank you for coming," Daniel said when he picked up the phone. "I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't," Emma admitted. "What do you want, Daniel?" "I'm being transferred to a federal prison in Pennsylvania tomorrow. 12 years, with possibility of parole in 8 if I behave." He laughed bitterly. 8 years. I'll be 41 when I get out. Middle-aged, broke with a felony record. My life is over. You did this to yourself, Emma said, not unkindly. I know. Daniel was quiet for a moment. I've had a lot of time to think in here. About my choices, about what I became, about you. And I realized something. What? You were the only real thing in my life. Everyone else, Victoria, my father, the socialites, the business partners, we were all using each other. Taking, manipulating, playing games. But you actually cared. You loved me genuinely, without calculation. And I threw that away for money and power that weren't even real. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not because I got caught, not because I'm going to prison, but because I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. You deserved better than me, Emma. You deserved someone who could appreciate what he had. Yes, Emma said softly. I did. Daniel nodded, accepting the truth of it. I heard you're the permanent chair now. Edward would be proud. I hope so. Emma, can I ask you something? What? Do you think you'll ever forgive me? Not forget. I know that's impossible. But someday, maybe years from now, do you think you could forgive me? Emma thought about it, really considered the question. She thought about the girl she'd been when she first met Daniel. Hopeful, naive, full of dreams. She thought about the woman she'd become. Hardened, powerful, scarred but stronger for it. I don't know, she said honestly. Maybe. Ask me in 8 years. Daniel smiled sadly. That's fair. More than fair. He stood up, preparing to leave. Goodbye, Emma. I hope you build something amazing. Goodbye, Daniel. She watched him walk away, the orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the designer suits she'd once known him in. And as the door closed behind him, Emma felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But perhaps the beginning of letting go. The new beginning. 6 months later, Emma stood on the stage of the Plaza Hotel ballroom, the same venue where her engagement party had been held nearly a year ago. But this time, there was no celebration of a false love. This was the annual Thornton Industries shareholder gala, and Emma was giving her first major address as permanent executive chairwoman. The room was filled with investors, employees, business leaders, and press. Emma wore a stunning emerald gown that matched her eyes. Eyes that no longer held naive hope, but instead gleamed with confidence and power. Ladies and gentlemen, Emma began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. A year ago, I stood in a room much like this one, thinking I had everything. Love, security, a future. What I actually had was illusions. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. The past year has been the hardest of my life. I've been betrayed, manipulated, and forced to make choices I never imagined I'd face. But I've also learned something crucial. Adversity doesn't break us. It reveals who we truly are. She clicked to a slide showing Thornton Industries' financial results.